Welcome to Galaxy Lore TV. Tonight's story is inspired by a real event, an unexplained incident from the small town of Aurora, Texas in 1897. According to witnesses, a mysterious airship crashed into a windmill, leaving wreckage scattered across the fields. But that's not the strange part. In the debris, townsfolk claimed they found a being, not of this earth. It's 6 a.m., and the sky is just starting to change from black to blue. But this morning, something uninvited arrives. A streak of fire, bright, violently cuts through the pale light. It burns as it falls, groaning like a dying beast, until the earth rises up to meet it. You sprint toward the wreck, your boots heavy with morning dew, heart thundering in your chest. The air is filled with the bitter smell of smoke and scorched metal. But nothing prepares you for what you see next. At first you think it's dead, but then it moves. A slow, pained breath escapes from the small figure lying in the wreckage, its body bent at impossible angles. The thing, whatever it is alive. You freeze. It's not fear that holds you, it's something deeper. The thing before you isn't just unfamiliar, it's wrong. It doesn't belong here, and yet it's looking at you. It doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. That gaze, it knows you, every fear, every hope, every choice you've ever made. There's no malice in its expression, just judgment. A quiet, knowing kind of judgment, as if it understands the deepest part of you without ever asking. The alien's gaze holds him fast. It's not a gaze of fear, nor anger. It's filled with something else, something ancient and knowing. Without a word, the alien speaks telepathically, directly into the judge's mind. Visions flood his thoughts. Without words, the story began to unfold, a story not meant for human ears. It was a story about us and what we truly are. The alien's thoughts bled into his mind. Visions of ancient beings hovering at the edge of existence. They were called the Archons, and their shadows reached deep into every human life. Humanity was never free, it said. We were vessels, incubators, grown to carry corrupted souls, harvested by beings that thrived on our fear and suffering. Every thought, every emotion, every life lived, all part of a dream designed by the Archons to keep us asleep. And then, just as the man thought the visions would overwhelm him, the alien spoke, not in the mind, but aloud. Its voice was weak, strained, but real.
Your people were never free. The Archons bind you, body and soul. They feed on your fear and keep you asleep.
The alien's voice is human, like... The sound makes the judge's heart pound. Hearing it out loud makes the truth even harder to bear. It's real. It's not just a vision, it's the truth. The alien coughs violently, clutching its side. The weight of its words hangs heavy in the air, the truth of humanity's imprisonment now exposed. Without knowing why, the man lifted the alien into his arms. Its body was cold, impossibly light, as if it barely belonged to this world. He brought it inside, laying it by the fire, wrapping it in a blanket. And through the long hours of the night, the two shared a quiet companionship, a strange connection born from loss. The alien was gentle, even in its suffering, a lonely soul adrift in a vast galaxy who had come too far to survive. The man stayed by its side, watching over it, not as a creature of another world, but as a fellow traveler. As dawn began to break once more, the alien stirred. It opened its eyes, those deep, endless eyes, and for a brief moment, it looked at him again. There was no fear, no regret, only acceptance. And then, with a soft sigh, it was gone. The man sat motionless, overwhelmed by a sorrow that felt as vast as the stars. It was more than grief. It was the weight of understanding. A life had ended, but with it, so had the chance to share its truth. The next morning, under the quiet sky, the man dug a grave. There were no words spoken, just the sound of shovel meeting earth. He lowered the small body into the ground, wrapping it gently in the same blanket. A simple stone was placed at the head of the grave. No name, no inscription, just a marker for a traveler who had come too far, only to perish alone. That night, the man finally slept. But peace did not find him. Instead, his dreams were filled with shadows, writhing ancient beings with tendrils that reached deep into his soul. He saw the Archons for what they were, vast, predatory things feeding on the souls of humanity like parasites. Their whispers filled his mind. Suddenly, the darkness shifted. The Archons pulled away, and he found himself standing at the grave. The alien's small stone marker rested quietly beneath the stars. But something was wrong. The earth beneath it was disturbed. The man knelt slowly, heart pounding, and brushed the dirt away. The grave was empty. The alien's body was gone. And then, from behind him, he heard it. A voice, weak, familiar, and unmistakable.
They found me. Run, John.
The man turned, but all he saw were the glowing eyes of the Archons staring back from the darkness. And in that moment, he knew. It was already too late. The judge jolted upright in his bed, gasping for breath, his heart hammering in his chest. The dream had felt so real. He could still see the Archons, their cold, glowing eyes staring down at him from the edge of the grave, their tendrils slithering toward him. He ran his hands over his face, trying to convince himself it was just a dream. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Later that day, a pastor passing through town stopped by, noticing the freshly dug grave. He asked about the burial, and the judge, with careful words, explained that it had been a traveler who had perished from injuries sustained the day before. The town listened quietly, exchanging glances, before deciding that a Christian funeral service would be the best way to honor the life that had ended in their care. They bowed their heads in silence as the pastor spoke of compassion and mercy. The alien was buried not as an outsider, but as one of their own, a stranger given peace beneath the Texas sky. For a brief moment, the judge thought, maybe the alien would rest now. Maybe he would too. But that evening, as soon as the judge closed his eyes, they were there, waiting. The Archons hovered at the edge of his mind, their dark, shifting forms twisting through the shadows. Their glowing eyes watched him, their tendrils slithering into his thoughts, feeding on his fear. And each time they whispered, the words chilled him to the bone. You belong to us. You always have. The judge woke, gasping for air, his heart pounding in his chest. But the dream, it lingered. It felt more real than anything he'd ever known, as though the Archons had left a piece of themselves inside him. Every night after that, the dreams returned. Each time the Archons grew closer, their tendrils wrapping tighter around his mind. He saw the alien again, its warning echoing through the darkness. And each time he begged for peace, the Archons whispered the same relentless truth. There is no escape, not in life, not in death. Every night, the dreams dragged the judge deeper into their grip. He stopped sleeping, then he stopped trying. But the Archons were always there, waiting for him, lurking at the edges of his waking moments, whispering promises that he would never be free. The judge knew then. The Archons would never stop. Not until they had taken every part of him, just as they had taken the alien. And every time he closed his eyes, they would be waiting.